Plants vs. Zombies 3 just got hit with a new wave of disappointment after a hyped up update ended up being incredibly lacking. We had a short streak of genuinely good additions, but I'm starting to think it was luck that PopCap managed to meet expectations for a little while. So what was this new update, and why are people annoyed? Well, it all goes back to the beginning of this soft launch. The game is currently incredibly lacking in content. The soft launch started in April and it is currently July. In that time, almost nothing new content-wise has been actually added. This soft launch also has considerably less content than the seedling build we playtested back in October 2025, which makes the current version feel strangely empty by comparison. And that lack of content creates a few pretty big problems. First, a lot of the content currently in the game feels like it was designed around a wider variety of plants that players do not actually have access to. So instead of experimenting with different strategies, you are forced to use the same small group of plants over and over again. Second, the lack of available plants can make the game harder than intended. Some parts of the game clearly feel like they expect you to have more options, but since those options are not available, certain levels become way more annoying than they probably should be. And third, there are several finished plants that are just not in the game for seemingly no reason. Even Bamboo Shoe, a plant from the 2024 soft launch Welcome to Zomburbia, was not included in the soft launch because... I don't know. So due to the lack of everything, the game gets stale really quickly. The leveling rework was a very good update, and I still think it made the game significantly better, but it did not help that we went then a month and a half of Plant Pass reruns. For new players returning to the game, those reruns are fine. It gives them a chance to catch up and unlock stuff they missed. But for people who had already been playing it, it mostly meant getting seeds, and seeds are not that useful when you do not have many new plants to unlock with them. Yeah, you can use seeds to unlock the level 5 and level 10 perks, but first off, in what world are you getting a plant to level 10 at a reasonable pace? And second, because level 5 is the only realistic perk level most players are going to reach, seeds only feel useful once for every plant. They are not that expensive either, especially with how often the game gives out wild seeds. So when PopCap started teasing new characters, it seemed like an easy win. The community has been saying the same thing for months. Please add new stuff. The game desperately needs it. We have characters from the previous beta that are still not here, we have new data mined characters people are excited about, and the last few updates have actually done a decent job listening to feedback. This should be a slam dunk! They added one new plant and zombie. Whoopee. So obviously, people are not happy. It has been 3 months since the soft launch started and 9 months since the seedling build. After all that waiting, and after 2 weeks of hype, the update added less than the bare minimum. At the very least, I do not think it is unreasonable to ask for around 5 new plants and 5 zombies minimum. Not every single character in the files, not everything from the seedling build, just enough to make the game feel like it is actually growing. But do you know what's even worse? Not being subscribed. Anyways, this ties into an issue PopCap has struggled with for years. They have zero idea on how to release content. Let's take a step back and look at the scope of this update. One new plant, one new zombie, and a handful of forgettable levels. Does that remind you of anything? It should remind you of the 2024 soft launch Welcome to Zomburbia. One of the biggest criticisms of that version was that it had basically no content. Barely any plants, barely any zombies, and barely anything unique. Every month, PopCap would add a single new plant, a single new zombie, and a handful of boring levels. And every month, the response is basically the same. People were disappointed. This monthly plant and zombie model clearly does not work when the game is already starving for content. And what made it even worse was that once again, there was content ready to go. PopCap just refused to release it for seemingly no reason. Remember Silver Sword, Chili Bean, Chomper? These plants were finished years in advance and they still never got added. So these updates would always get overhyped and then immediately get crushed by expectations. PopCap had an entire failed soft launch to learn that this update strategy did not work, and somehow it is still being done. And that's what makes this recent update so frustrating. Unlike Welcome to Zomburbia, which was complete garbage, PvZ 3 Evolved is actually pretty decent. There is a good game in here somewhere. We had some good updates before this, and for a second it felt like PopCap was finally starting to understand what people wanted. But now I am concerned that we are going back to the same old bad habit of not understanding the fans, and that those good updates were just lucky swings. And this problem gets even worse when you look at the batch of new levels. Every level in this game is bad. They use randomly generated layouts that are frustrating to play with, and they reuse the same zombies everywhere, so none of the levels feel unique. In PvZ 2, worlds had zombies designed around their environment. Pirate Seas had pirate zombies, Wild West had cowboy zombies, Far Future had future zombies. PvZ 3 does not do that. You can have a goalie zombie in the sewers, a landscaper in the volcano, and a parasol zombie on your front lawn. There is no real theming. Zombies just get thrown into levels for the sake of it. They already cut the bloated 150 adventure levels down to 75, which is still really repetitive, but at least it is less. So why are we adding 25 new levels for a single new plant and zombie? Some of the new levels do not even take advantage of the new zombie. It is genuinely just more bloat. And I know some people are going to be like, well, GJ, don't you think it is unrealistic for them to add everything at once? That is not what I'm asking for. I am not asking for PopCap to dump 80 characters into the game overnight. Obviously, that would be unreasonable. But it should be obvious that one new plant and one new zombie is not enough. Again, look at the seedling build. Yes, some characters were unfinished, but some were finished. And that build was 9 months ago. I do not think it is unreasonable to expect at least some of the unfinished characters to be finished by now. And then there's the plant pass itself. Since the new plant they added is a tier 2, they decided to make the entire pass focused around it for some reason instead of a tier 3. So now you can pay $10 for a tier 2 plant. Somehow we are getting more expensive than PvZ 2 premium plants. The only way I could ever see the single plant and zombie update model working is if it was weekly. If every week added one new plant, one new zombie, and a few levels, then sure, maybe that could build momentum. But monthly? After months of waiting? That is just not enough. That is the core issue with this update. It is not just that one plant and one zombie is bad on its own. It is that PvZ 3 is already struggling for content. Players have been begging for new things. The game has finished content sitting around. Previous soft launches already proved this release strategy does not work, and PopCap still chose to do it again. PvZ 3 is not hopeless. That is what makes this so annoying. The game has improved a lot from where it used to be. The leveling rework was decent. Some of the recent additions were good. There are parts of this version that actually feel promising. But at some point, the game needs actual content. More plants, more zombies, better levels, better theming, more reasons to come back that are not just reruns and seeds. And this update just did not do that. So what do you think? Am I being a whiny baby? Or is one new plant and one new zombie after months of waiting reasonable? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.